go.
Can you hear the music? The effects work though.
Do that. Okay, so here we are. Welcome to another edition of Think with a Drink, the weekly webinar series brought to you by the Ares Foundation for Financial Education. This week's episode, we are talking about 529s and really whether or not the 529, which has sort of come to the front or the forefront of saving for college, is really the only way that a family can save for college. As we start this up, as we usually do, a little pre-flight checklist for our audience, just so you know we are recording this. We do share these recordings on our website. We do share them on our YouTube channel. Just know we'll ask you to keep your microphone muted. Your cameras can be on or off, really, it doesn't matter. The only people who will show up is Craig and myself. Everybody else that's just recording what's being shown on the screen. However, there is a chat box. So if you do have questions, we do ask that you drop that information into the chat box. My co-pilot, who I will introduce in a second, is here to not only chime in as we go along, but also to be navigating and manning that chat box and trying to keep this flight somewhat on time. All right, a little bit about your presenters, your pilots for tonight's flight. My name is Tom Alessi. I'm the president of the Ares Foundation. I have been in financial services for, God bless, 23 years. The next time I do one of these shows, I will be in my 24th year, Craig. I'm an investment advisor. That means I act as a fiduciary whenever giving guidance or advice to any of my clients. I want to bring my vice president, Craig. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Craig Richardson. I'm the vice president of the Ares Foundation. I've been in financial services a little over 18 years now, and I specialize in working with families and small businesses to help them define their financial goals and have a better relationship with their money.
And Craig will be chiming in as we go along with this presentation tonight. But like I said, he's also here to sort of man the ship behind the scenes, driving the boat as we go along and answering the chat box if any questions do pop up. I told you that Think with a Drink is brought to you by the Ares Foundation for Financial Education. We are a nonprofit. You can visit our website. It's www.aresfoundation.org. And the mission behind Ares is trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. Because whether you realize it or not, you are in a relationship with money. And just like every other personal relationship that you have, there are behaviors and emotional triggers that can cause us to act, well, Craig and I like to say, irrationally sometimes when it comes to dealing with our money and our finances. All myself, Craig, the rest of the Ares team tries to do is help everyone get a better handle on that and take some of that emotion out of dealing with their money. All right, so there's a lot of words on the screen here with disclosures. I'm not going to read them. Just know, like I said, we're a nonprofit. We do this for education. We do this for information. We just ask that if you're going to share this content, you do it in an educational and informational manner. One thing that Craig and I and the rest of the team stress to everybody is that if you ever have questions, whether they be legal, tax, or financial, you seek out the help of a professional to get those questions answered. That was a lot of talking for me.
A lot of talking for you.
Okay, so now we come to the fun part of the evening. We call this Think with a Drink because we want the information to be more casual, more relaxed, easier to indulge in than if you were just trying to lecture you on some stuff. And we can't think of a better way to do that if we have something cold to sip on as we go along. Now, tonight I'm drinking, this is from our friends out at Treehouse. They are located in Charlton, Massachusetts. But, it's on 529s. As I said to Craig, what's the two things that if you think of college students, that immediately come to mind, and that's pizza and beer. right? And so this is what's called their pizzeria pills. It is Pilsner-based, German-based Pilsner, toasty, kind of malty, got a bread finish to it. But really, the idea for them is what they say is that if you're having a light pie, like a margarita or a cheese pie, the best beer you can have with that is a Pilsner. So that's what I'm drinking. Craig, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking a Pizzeria Pilsner from.
Awesome, dude. That's what we like to hear. See, when we're in simpatico, everything works well. So we'll say skol.
Skol. Oh, that's good. I thought it would taste like pepperoni.
No, I think the pepperoni, you have to get a different one for that.
Oh, okay.
So no, let's not get too good. But I was thinking of this. This is you and I now having a conversation. I'm thinking about maybe we do one of these that's just on pizza and beer.
There you go.
Because as you get to pepperoni or any meats, you don't want to be in the Pilsner now. You want to be something a little darker. You get into the veggies and the mushrooms type of thing. Maybe you want the IPA. There's this whole thing about, pizza and beer and what you should be drinking with it. For this is more, as I said, the classic light pie, a margarita, a light cheese pizza. This will go very well.
It would also be the search for the best pizza in New England, because New York's known for its pizza. Even Rhode Island's known for its pizza, but Massachusetts isn't necessarily known for its pizza. So it'd be good to find a good pizza, a couple good pizzas.
So now we have to have pizza too? I just was looking at the beer, and now we're talking about eating pies and having beer.
What you just said. So
I said no. I said I said the topic should be pizza and beer.
Well,
in terms of, you're talking about eating them. I'm talking about matching them up and pairings. What goes with what?
I don't know. Maybe we should do a joint episode with a Phantom Gourmet. That's what we should do.
Something like that. Yeah. So find a pizza place that would serve us the slices of pie, and we can then match them up with beer.
There you go.
Okay. Moving on to the topic at hand. It's a 529 account. What is it, right? This is the agenda. Why are they so popular? Other strategies to consider and ways to save on, not for higher education. Because the thing that gets most parents is they start looking at sticker shock and wait a minute, how am I going to handle that? And a lot of times, Greg, right, that gets just pushed off, right? I don't even want to think about it, trying to save for that.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're first starting a family, you have a new baby and all that. People, you need to start the college funding now. Sometimes it's just not the right timing. You're trying to do multiple things at the same time. You're trying to buy your first home, you just had your first child, getting used to new expenses. But at some point, you may want to come back and revisit that. So
right. And so for a lot of families, what happens is when they revisit it, the first thing that gets brought up or gets told to them or gets spoken about is a 529 account, right? That's sort of become I was joking. It's like saying Coke when you're talking about soft drinks in general, right? Or Kleenex when you're talking about just a tissue, because it's become now that, what is that word? Ubiquitous. I think that is the right word for that. The term, for college savings. Like everybody thinks, okay, well, I've got to have a 529 account then.
And like Xerox.
There you go. See, now we're talking. Now you got it. So you got to that. But in some cases, yes. And we're going to go through, why the 529 is so good. We're going to look at some other options on this. But I think part of it is sometimes it might just be like, this is what I was told, or this is what my advisor or my financial guy or something I heard on TV said, and we don't really look at other options.
Mm-hmm.
But
correct.
Why they are so popular, right? When we look at 529s, so just a little history and background into the 529 plan itself, really came into effect in the late 1990s. Though you really won't see too much on the record for that, because back then they were taxable accounts. So you didn't really have a lot of traction. You didn't really have a lot doing it. However, in 2001, EGTERRA there, that is the Economic Growth Tax Reconciliation Relief Act of 2001.
That's 3 times fast.
Oh, God bless. You should try reading that, EGTERRA, in terms of going through it. But the Tax Relief Act of 2001 put the 529, one of the pieces of it said that the 529 plan would now be tax-free on the growth. However, that growth will sunset on 2010. So you had a sunset provision inside Egterra that said, yeah, it's going to be tax-free, but only for the next 9 years. In 2010, we're going to sunset that and make them taxable accounts again.
Makes it tough when you're planning long-term.
Yes. So the PPA, which is the Pension Protection Act of 2006, signed into law in 2007, said, no. Who's planning this? Who designed that? That's a crazy thing, like Greg just said. No, what needs to happen now is these are permanently going to be tax-free on the growth if withdrawn for education for the beneficiary of the account. So now completely tax-free. A further enactment, I want to say it was could have been 2009, could have been 2010, but also translated that to, so when you transfer an old UTMA, which is a unified tax to minor, or an UGMA, a unified gift to minor, these were ways to save. We're going to talk about these in a little bit. When they were transferred to 529s, the UGMA provisions used to stay in place, which made them taxable to the parent or the kid, depending on the situation. Now, as a 529, they're not taxable either. Again, so long as it's used for the education purposes for the beneficiary, no tax consequence, another key part to that.
And I know you're going to talk about it later, but just because it says parents, not kids money, if you did transfer an UGMA or an UTMA, that would become the child's at age 18. Is that still the case if it's transferred to the 529?
So it's a great question, and honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I think it still falls under the UGMA-UTMA rule, and we will talk about that as there's a situation and what happens there with it.
Yep.
I believe that is the case, but again, if the funds aren't used for education purposes, then you get penalized for it.
Gotcha.
Okay, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you can fully fund pretty much, the contribution limits on 529s. It's like 400,000, 450. I think one of them goes to $500,000 you can put into these things.
Wow.
You can fully fund the child's education. I don't care where they go in that situation, right? So you've got the ability to park a lot of money in here, should you choose to do that. But as Craig said, one of the biggest things is a 529 is looked at as parents' money, not the kids' money. And whenever we're talking to financial aid, one of the things is it's better to have money in your name, assets in your name, than it is to have in your kid's name, because money in your child's name gets looked at as a bigger piece when we're dealing with financial aid. Parents, it's like less, it's like 5.6% or so. A kid, it's like almost 25%. So you don't want to have money in the kid's name if you can avoid it at any cost. That's just one of those, hey, we're trying to save on the cost of college, not for it. So that's what a 529 does. You're the owner, they're the beneficiary, right? The other thing with 529s is you can change the beneficiary. We did a whole piece on that. We did a post on it about who is a beneficiary and who can be changed. You can generally change usually twice a year with the beneficiary. And it's so long as it's a family member, i.e. somewhere in the lineage, all the way out, cousins and spouses of cousins and grandparents and so on, that counts. That's a designated beneficiary. You can transfer it to them and there won't be any of the penalty or charges. The minute you try to move it to a non-designated beneficiary, though, Greg, you get hit with the penalty. And we'll talk about the penalty in a second. All right.
Wow. Okay.
But that's what a 529 account is. That state registered security thing, that it's a state sponsored. That's why the state is hiring an investment company to run the 529 for them. And that's why you see every single state has a particular investment company they're working with. Here in Massachusetts, through the Mass Education Finance Authority, MIFA, they use Fidelity. So Fidelity is handling the plan. The state of Massachusetts hires Fidelity to do that because it's a state registered security. That means the state is responsible for it. The government has no insight into it whatsoever. And each state has their own rules and what they can do.
Because these are state sponsored, the fees are typically pretty low in these accounts, correct?
Yes, there are fees, and we will talk about that in a second, but because they're mandated and state registered, like Craig said, generally the fees are going to be lower. Though you do have, the difference between a direct sold plan. I mean, that's like going to Fidelity and just buying it versus an advisor sold plan. They can be lower.
Whenever you cut out a middleman, someone's not taking another piece of the pie.
Right. Exactly. As far as going through that is part of it, in terms of dealing with it. Now, some of the drawbacks, right? The 529 has to be used for education. Again, has to be used for the education of the beneficiary. The beneficiary does not have to be the designated beneficiary of today if the child decides not to go to school, or if it gets a scholarship, that's a different conversation. We'll cover that in a second. But let's say the child decides not to go to school. Well, you can designate another sibling or wait until that child grows up, has a family, and then designate their child as the beneficiary. So you can stretch this out for those purposes without running it afoul of the, hey, you're going to get hit with a penalty on this. And here's the penalty. The penalty is 10% of the growth. They're going to take just like if you tried to withdraw your IRA early. It's a 10% penalty plus taxes on the growth.
If it's used for anything aside from education. And what would qualify as an educational expense?
So the educational expense has been broadened. It keeps broadening. And to what qualifies as higher education isn't just a traditional college or university. The one I like to turn to is golf school. You want to go to golf school, you can use your 529 to attend golf school. Now, I don't know that it'll let you pay for the clubs, to upgrade and buy yourself a whole new set of irons type of thing. But if it was necessary for attending school, then you can say, listen, it's for me to attend school. I need this book, computer, whatever the case may be.
What about transportation costs?
Yeah, traveling gets a little weird with that. We say, well, hey, I commute. I need a car to go back and forth. I want to use the money from the 529 to do that. You're going to get into that real sketchy gray area. It's like the same idea if I was, going to the University of Hawaii and now I'm traveling back and forth to Hawaii on a regular basis. So, some of that does count. You can use it as a deduction, but doesn't necessarily, you can run afoul of it and then, you're just going to blow the whole thing up. So I stick basically to tuition, room and board, and general expenses that go along with attending the school or wherever you're going.
So I can't buy a Porsche.
No, I would not suggest buying a Porsche or a Tesla, right?
But
So
golf lessons, that's good.
yeah, well, if you're attending golf school, hopefully you don't need the lessons. That's what it may be a coach though. There's limited tax benefits, right? So depending on the state you live in, because it's only state taxes that we're dealing with. The federal does not give any benefit for putting money into a 529. Depending on the state, it can be here in Massachusetts. I don't know what the rule is today because honestly, I forgot to look it up before we started. I know they were banting back and forth about continuing the deduction that they were doing, which was $1,000 per adult per child. So husband and wife could put $2,000 into the Fidelity MIFA account and get $2,000 on the state tax deduction. Not a lot of money here.
Not a credit.
Correct. It's a deduction and it's not a lot. It doesn't equal a lot here. Other states might give you more. You have to look at your own state for that. One of the limits is they're generally mutual fund portfolios built by the investment company, and you have a limited amount that you can use. There's usually either static portfolios, which basically say conservative, moderate, or growth, for the type of portfolio I want, or they're age-based, which means they're going to do the glide path. In fact, the whole original glide path, journey, lifestyle, whatever the hell, freedom fund, whatever you want to call them, that are now prevalent and pretty much everywhere in every single 401k in the universe came from here. This whole idea of this journey fund, this is what sparked all of that, because, hey, I can invest this when the kid is 5 and it's going to slowly, morph over. And by the time they get through college, now I'm going to be conservative.
And you don't have to keep resetting and rebalancing and keep watching on this thing as you're putting money over the years, right?
No, and that's the whole point with it, is that you don't have that, because they're either in a static portfolio that's doing it for you, or the glide path portfolio, which is going to do that and just morph the risk out over time. As Craig said, there are fees, right? So there's always going to be fees. Direct sold, i.e. a Vanguard, a Fidelity, those type, might be direct sold, which means that you don't have a load that goes along with it. There's just whatever the management fee is inside it. Advisor sold means that there's a load generally that goes along with it, but even at that, those loads are treated like break points. They're in a lesser amount than if you try to just go in and buy like a straight mutual fund.
Wow.
Ownership, right? So, really the whole idea here is the parent is the owner, the beneficiary is the child. But as we said, if you try to make changes to that, it's not a designated beneficiary, then you can blow the whole thing up. And next thing you know, you're paying taxes on the growth and you got a 10% penalty. But the flip side is that ownership is it belongs to the parents. And much like we'll talk about when we get to the UGMA, the parent owns this. The parent can decide, I'm taking the money back. It's mine. I'm going to do what I want with it. I'm not going to fund your education. So you do have a little bit of that. The beneficiary has no control of this money. It always belongs to the parent.
Yeah, unless the parent dies, and then there's either a successor owner or the beneficiary of the 529 actually gets the money.
Right. Yeah, and good point with that. With the successors, one thing we usually recommend if you do set up a plan, one parent, if there's 2 parents, one parent is the owner, one parent is the successor custodian, the successor owner, and just in case something happens, and to go through that. All right, so, what else can you do? What are the other opportunities or other strategies out there? Well, you have this thing that's called a Coverdale, and it's actually ESA. It's not an IRA, but for all purposes, it's an education IRA is what it is. It used to be back in the day, the old education IRA, which you could put I think in the beginning, it was like $250 in the thing.
So it's fairly limited if I remember.
Yeah, well, what was that? Even now it's $2,000 is the max you can put in. But I mean, what's that getting you out over time? I mean, how much you might get 1 year's tuition out of the whole thing in terms of going through it if you did it every year. But it does the exact same. The 529 is built off the chassis of the Coverdale. It's the whole same thing. The money goes in, any of the growth is tax-free so long as it's used for education. The limit to the Coverdale is that you're not putting a lot of money in there. So it makes it difficult to try to save up a big chunk with it. You can do straight mutual funds. Just go out and open an account for the kid and start funding it that way. If you're using a direct provider like Vanguard or somebody like that, there's not going to be any load. You do have capital gains that come into it. And that is one of the things that does happen with any mutual fund, as most people have found out, or certainly will find out at the end of this year, that even with the downturn in the market, you're going to get capital gains because the mutual fund company has been buying and selling to offset some of the risk and losses in those portfolios. It's an easier way to do it. You don't have to worry if the kid doesn't go to school, there's no hook on it. It's just money that's sitting there. You can give it to them to use it for a down payment on a home or purchase a business or whatever, versus it has to be used for education.
The only downside is that you're paying taxes on it going in and coming out.
Correct. You're paying taxes all the way along, which can, suck away at some of that and cause problems in terms of. And one of the things that you could do, depending, is a Roth IRA. Now, a Roth has different limitations, different rules. For somebody who's under 50, you can only put 6 grand into a Roth. You have to have a certain earning limit in terms of doing that. But if it's in there for enough time, it becomes seasoned. If you get to 55, by the time the kid is going to college, you're now in a situation where you can take it out. You don't have any of the penalties and you're using it for education purposes. So you wouldn't want into it, and there's no taxation.
Right. I think it's either 5 years or 59 and a half, right?
Something like that. There's a seasoning on there. I thought it was 55, but you could be right with the 59. I could be thinking of the 5 with the 5-year thing. But I think if it's used for education purposes, you can get around it as well, as far as the 10% penalty thing.
Correct. Or a first-time home purchase. That's the other thing you could take it out for after 5 years.
Right. But again, the limitation is you can only put 6 or 7 grand in. So how much are you really putting away? Now, maybe husband and wife, you're each putting 6 or 7 grand away, depending on your age. You have to be over 50 to have that extra 1,000 go in. So if you're under 50 or 35 years old, you just had the kid, you could each put 12 grand, 6,000 each, total of 12 grand into Roths that would then be building up tax-free for use for education for the kid. And again, if the kid doesn't go to school, you've got that money built up for your retirement or for something else.
Yeah. The only other restriction is sometimes, if you make too much money, the Roth contribution goes
Right.
away.
That's what I said. There's a limit on that, the cap in terms of being able to who can contribute and how much you can put in.
Or if you're putting too much money in your other retirement accounts, it may limit what you can put in the Roth.
Right.
Now you can always do it under the child's name, but they have to have earned income.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So if they're
Yeah,
working,
depending on how old they are. If they're 3, it's tough.
well, no, I have a client. He has a Roth IRA for his child because he did a little modeling gig for a commercial and got a paycheck.
Oh, there
He
you
stuck
go.
that money right into a Roth account. So he's 2 years old.
It does happen. There you go. There you
So
go.
that
2-year-old with a Roth.
Years, it's gonna be worth $1 million, right?
Annuities, right? So this is one where we talk about annuities. And the reason for this is annuities, when we're talking about financial aid, annuities are treated like retirement income. That means the money that's sitting in an annuity is not looked at for financial aid purposes. It's considered retirement, whether it's non-qualified or in an IRA, it doesn't matter. Any annuity is considered a retirement asset. So when you are filling out the FAFSA form, an annuity does not show up. So one of the ways to sort of get around that whole, maybe I can park the money over here for 5 years, wait for the kid to get out of college, and then it's liquid again. I have it back, but nobody ever saw it.
So like a bait and switch.
Yeah, kind of. It's a way of doing it. You put the money in, you held it for the time period it was supposed to be held for, reasonable expectation.
As long as it's legal, right?
UGMA is under, again, this unified gift of minor, unified trust of minor. The problem here, as Craig was sort of mentioning, is that at age of majority, not only is there a tax consequence, again, if they don't get moved to a 529, but at age of majority, at age of 18, this money now belongs to the kid. And you may love your child. You may think your child is the smartest puppy in the world and has every best intention and plan. But, all of a sudden coming into a chunk of money at 18 and realizing that's a Harley or a trip to Hawaii or something crazy, they can do whatever they want with it. You have no control at that point. So one of those that, may not be in a best equation or best situation for folks at this point.
Yeah, they may not care about any penalty because they didn't put anything in to begin with.
Right. They got no skin in it. Absolutely. So brokerage or ETFs, and by this we mean individual stocks, ETFs or exchange traded funds. So similar to like mutual funds, except for in this case, you're just buying individual stocks or the exchange traded fund that's representative of an index, doing the same thing like in a mutual fund where you're just opening an account and funding into that account, trying to build up a portfolio, an asset base of cash to use to help offset the child's education. Better that it's in your name, not in the child's name to help that. And again, if the child ends up not going to school or choosing not to go to college, then the money can be used for anything you want it to be used for. You're not held to this whole thing of, hey, it's got to be used for education. Otherwise, I'm going to get taxed and penalized on it. Savings bonds. This is another one. Again, great tool, except for it's limited. You can only put $10,000 is the maximum you can do on an annual basis into a savings bond. Right now the I bonds are paying 9.75%. They reset twice a year. They'll reset again in October, then they reset back in March as far as the interest that they're going to earn. Have to hold them for at least 12 months as far as I bonds are concerned. But again, maximum is 10,000. So you can only do 10,000 a year. Whether or not that makes sense for you, okay, you can have a whole bunch of I bonds, but you got to be thinking about ways that you're dealing with it.
That's another strategy. That's all.
Yeah.
And you may already have some of these bonds. So
right. And then the last one is life insurance. Now, a lot of times people don't think of life insurance because they only think of term insurance. But what we're talking about here is cash value. And the fact that if, depending on when you open it, especially depending on the age of the child, that you can be putting money away. This money then grows and it's available to you and it's not looked at. FAFSA will never see it. And you can then withdraw the money out of the portfolio, out of the cash value that's in there, right, Greg, to be able to use it for anything you want.
yeah, once again, it's almost sort of like a Roth account in the fact that you're putting in money after you pay tax on it. But the growth inside of it, as long as you take it out the right way, can come out almost it grows tax deferred and come out almost tax free, depending on how you put the thing together.
Right.
So it allows, but once again, it doesn't have the restrictions that a Roth has or a 529 account has. You can use this cash for any purpose that you like.
Absolutely. And that's just, again, it's another tool in the arsenal and just another thing to be thinking of or looking at as you're putting your plan together. And part of that plan is creating the budget that the kid is going to need, right? How much is tuition going to be? Room and board, books, other material like we talked about, the other stuff, which gets into the computer. Do I need travel expenses? Do I need other things that go along with it? Yes, I'd like a brand new set of shiny golf clubs, but that doesn't necessarily, just because I'm going to the University of Nebraska, I'm not playing golf there. So that doesn't equate to it. But the idea is that you're creating that sort of, hey, this is what the expenses are going to be if the kid goes to UMass Amherst, if they go to, Boston University, if they go to the University of Michigan, whatever it is, to try to figure it out.
Well, what's even interesting, Tom, is how they made a lot of different adjustments to the 529 and what you could and couldn't do with it. A few years ago, they actually expanded it, and now you can use it for private education.
Oh, yes.
Right. So if you have a private high school, I think it's K through 12 now that's allowed for
right.
educational expenses. So just another way you can use that money, even if it wasn't geared towards college. So
yeah, absolutely. And it does come down, and as we bring this up in terms of the summary, right? So to summarize it, the 529 is probably, if we're really talking about just, pure focused, we're trying to put an education plan together to fund education needs for child one or child two or both of them. The 529 is the way to go, right? That is the ultimate. But as we talked about, depending on as the child grows and ages and you try to start figuring things out, maybe little Johnny, yes, maybe little Sally, no. Maybe now it starts to look at, hey, there's other options and other strategies that I could put in place that can go hand in hand with this, right, Craig? Because I think that's always the thing, is like trying to build out, different versions or different strategies to go along instead of all in one type thing.
Well, I think the other thing that's nice about it too, Tom, is the fact that we talk about the bucket strategy, right? Emergency reserves, and then your secondary bucket with those, goals, and then your long-term goals. So the 529 kind of puts that educational savings or goal in its own bucket.
Right.
And let's not forget the one little loophole that really works, which I actually use, is when your grandparents actually own the account on the child.
Oh, I didn't know we were going to talk about that. Shh. Now, okay, so this is inside baseball stuff, right? And I actually just had this happen with a client, just so you know. So I was talking to them, and he's like, "Oh yeah, my dad opened this account. They were in another state, opened it with their state, and he wanted to transfer it over to me. is the kid's getting ready to go to college? And I said, no. And he's like, what do you mean? I go, no, you leave it in his name, because in the grandparents, your parents' names, right? The grandparents of your son or daughter, it's never looked at. FAFSA does not see it. The CSS profile doesn't see it. Nobody ever sees it, because they're not a member of your immediate household. And so that is not reported as an asset anywhere.
But the child's still a beneficiary, so it still works.
The money goes to the school or to the kid and they pay for college, absolutely. But FAFSA, financial aid, never sees it. So a little inside baseball there. That's one of the tips and tricks we have. And you can check out our YouTube channel. We talk about that, the ways to save on, not for the cost of college. Because as we talked about, some of these schools, $75,000, $85,000 a year, you're not saving that lump sum. But can you reduce that tuition need, that cost that the school is trying to charge you, and get workarounds and ways to do that? You can check out our YouTube channel. You can go to our website to see that. Absolutely.
But I guess to summarize too, Tom, regardless of the strategy you choose, start now.
Yes, it's always good starting, no matter what it is. It's one of the things Craig and I say to everybody, right? Savings, you can never get time back. Right? That's one of the things that you can never get back. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're saving for retirement, saving for the education, saving for a down payment, just start. Put something away and stick to it, and put a plan in place to maintain that and make it happen. That's what's going to build wealth. That builds wealth more than anything else. Any other craziness, cryptocurrency, all this other stuff going on, having a systematic way to put away money is what builds wealth.
That's why all vampires are wealthy. They live forever.
They live forever. So, for us here at Aries, we say you need to have a clear vision of the road ahead, because we know there's zigs, there's zags, there's turns, there's speed bumps, there's potholes, all sorts of stuff happens on the road. Our job is to try to help you get a clear vision of where you're trying to get to and what you're trying to accomplish. We do that with what we call a roadmap to financial awesomeness. It's complimentary. We're happy to go through and do that. If you type yes into the chat box, Craig will probably drop his scheduler into the chat box as well. But if you just reach out to us, we're happy to set up a time. This is a visual tool that will help you see not only where you are, but where you want to get to. Mm-hmm. This is Craig and I in our more formal attire. Yes, those are TB12 jerseys. They don't say Brady on the back. They're actually custom to us. And as long as he's continuing to play, we're going to continue to wear them. We went through this whole tirade the other day with somebody on the whole Mac Jones thing, and Craig keeps pushing me with the Mac attack. Enough with the Mac attack. We'll get there eventually, I think.
Training camp, buddy.
Yeah.
Training camp now.
Yeah. My version of TGIF. Thank God it's football. So what's on tap? We keep the Think with a Drink going. So next week, we're going to do the ABCs of Medicare. So this is the alphabet soup of Medicare. You need Part A, you need Part B, what's C, what's D, what's all the other stuff that goes along with that. We'll cover all of that next week. That's on 8/4. 8/11, 8/18, Craig and I are still coming up with some thoughts and ideas as we go forward with this. But check the website. You can look at that, www.ariesfoundation.org, to see, because we always list what's coming up there. And you can always,
topic that you're interested in, you can let us know too.
Absolutely. We always mention that. If you got a topic or something that you're looking for, you can fill that out on the form and just send it along to us, or you can send us an email, info@ariesfoundation.org. Certainly appreciate that, Craig. That's absolutely true. Craig, any questions in the chat box?
No. Just what is your obsession with Tom Brady? That's the only question.
He's the greatest of all time. Why do I have to have an obsession with that? He's won more Super Bowls than every other single team in the history of football. He's got 7 Super Bowl rings. That's more than anybody else.
You're holding on that jersey like he's coming back to New England.
I'm still waiting for the one day sign and retire thing, and then go there. So I have the ticket from his last game in Farquhar, the last Brady jersey, the last time he was in a Patriots uniform.
And you did call that before anything was official. I'll give you that.
Yes. Okay. Well, on that note, and on the Brady note, I'm going to say thank you all and have a great evening.